Hey, welcome to the first edition of Chicago High School Football Legends. I know most of the people out there watching right now are used to this channel being Bears Banner, but we still have Bears Banner. We're just doing a spinoff show. So tonight on the broadcast, you got myself, Cydney Muhammad. We got Guy Moore and Keith Floydnoy, a.k.a. Baby Plank. Hey, what's going on?
Stick, woo!
What's going on with you? How's it going today?
It's going good. Hey, Plank, on Sunday, Guy, myself, Terrence Cook, who was a quarterback in high school, and
what's up, Cook?
All right, and Emerson Bowie, we were sitting back and we were talking, and anyway, we ended up talking about high school football, and Guy made a comment that, man, we need to bring you on the show, referring to Terrence Cook, because Cook was just dropping all these names. He had said people names like Dempsey Norman, Mark Dean. He was just naming a bunch of players, Carl Boyd, etc. And I said, man, let's do a podcast on that, man. I mean, what do you think, Plank? You think it's a good idea? Because I know you and I talked about it over the years.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, a lot of times people don't realize how we revered other players from other schools, and that just made us compete a little bit harder. So a lot of times it's good to hear the stories that people otherwise wouldn't have heard before. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Yeah, Guy, I know you was pumped just like me.
Yeah, it was, man, because back in the era, it was like grunt era, man. It was like you saw guys who played in the league in the summer. They was playing like in the neighborhood with no pads on. So I understand football's a business and all that stuff, but how many of them guys you hear about getting hurt playing tackle football with no pads? Nobody, because they love the game and they want to play, and iron sharpens iron, man.
Right. So, hey, I want to bring up a stat real quick. Let me bring this into the stream. Okay, our guest tonight, our first guest in episode 1 of Chicago High School Football Legends is none other than Cydney Muhammad. The people who played against him in high school knows him as Cydney Payne. Cydney went to Limblom Tech High School, played 3 years on the varsity. He played 1980, 81, 82. Starter for 2 years. Dude never got off the field. He was the starting running back, starting cornerback, starting punt returner, starting kickoff returner. We estimated him at 2,100 yards from the backfield. No telling how many he had. If you add in kickoff returns and punts, probably almost 4,000 yards. He had estimated 37 touchdowns. He was all city, all section. In 1981, 82 is all section. And if Cydney have anything he want to correct, please join me on bringing Cydney Muhammad onto the screen.
Hey, what's up,
man? What's going on, brothers? Brothers, good to see you all.
Before y'all even get started, y'all, y'all 3 illustrious brothers, Gangster, EB, Omega Psi Phi out of Western Illinois University. Give it up to him.
Hey. Oh, I appreciate it. Plank, Guy, Bernard. Hey, it's wonderful to see you guys' faces, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes.
It's good to see you, Sid. I know over the years, like you probably heard us talking offline when you was off the line about how often we talk about Chicago football. It's not like we're trying to be Al Bundy or nothing like that. But in football, it's a whole lot of lessons. And what made me start thinking about this some years ago, actually, was one day I was in Evergreen Plaza. So you know how far back that was. And I ran into one of our frat brothers and offensive guard, Andre Bullock. And even though we had been engaged, Andre was somebody who wasn't in my immediate circle. And for some reason, I looked at Andre and I said, man, do you still dream about some of the football games? And he was like, yep. So Cydney,
hey, Bernard, Bernard, I'm sorry. I can't hear you that well. You
Okay.
sound kind of low and like your voice bouncing off the wall. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. I don't know if you might need.
Yeah, but I heard you speak of Andre Bullock up at the Plaza on 95th and Western, I think it is. Oh,
Correct. So, Cydney, how did you start playing football? I mean, when was your first memory of playing football?
Well, I was 9 years old. Played with my brothers, my older brothers. All of my brothers are older than I. And so when we moved to Chicago, I moved to Chicago from Mississippi with my family when I was 9. And they turned me on to football, and I became a big Bears fan. I would go outside with my friends, and we played football. And I found that I just had a passion for anything that was competitive. And to be honest with you, the tougher the sport, the more fun it was for me. You know, we didn't have boxing leagues, so I couldn't do that. But playing football and in the snow and on the ground, as crazy as it seems, sometimes even on concrete. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I started when I was 9 years old. And as you know, in Chicago, we used to have street teams, you know, informal teams.
Yep.
And so wherever we lived, we'd always have a street team, and I'd always join it. But yeah, started when I was 9.
Okay, started it when you was 9. You know what? You and Keith Plank had a distinction to me that I wonder how y'all was so good in football, because when I look at some of the pictures, y'all were playing in Chuck Taylor's.
Yeah, sure was.
It is right.
I mean, think about how much better, and you was a great player, Cydney, that your performance would have been. You know, I'm talking about your junior year, because I know your senior year you had cleats. If you were playing in cleats.
Yeah, that's true. You know, there was some cuts that I would make where I would slip down simply because I didn't have cleats. But you know, it's funny. Lindblom had such academic prowess, but when it came to sports, sometimes it was just not a whole lot invested in it. You would think that for a kid who was from a poor family like myself, and some of the other guys, quite frankly, you know, if we were excelling at a sport, the least that maybe could have happened was we'd be able to get decent cleats. But maybe, I don't know, maybe that was against the rules or something, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think I would have done better if I had cleats. I remember one game we played, I guess it was senior year, my Chuck Taylors just ripped apart, and I had to borrow one of the other players, might have been Royce Jackson. I had to borrow his cleats, you know. But yeah, Plank and I were playing in normal gym shoes. And if you recall, Coach Matty, sometimes he would say, hey, just regular gym shoes are good enough. I don't know if that really was the case, but yeah, a lot of times we played in regular gym shoes.
Hey, you know what? I'm going to tell you, them Chuck Taylors probably saved y'all knees too, because at least you slid. Like when you would plant, if it was slippery, your foot would slide. If you had those cleats, you're like that, and the next thing that goes is a knee. So that's why you guys are 25 years old, and y'all walking around and got your and from a baseball standpoint, man, I know they outlawed like metal cleats, and I can't tell you the number of times I see guys would slide, like if it was mud, they would slide and their cleats would get caught, and I've seen legs bend in certain ways. So, man, playing in them Chuck Taylors was a blessing. But before we do that, I got to tell y'all Cydney Muhammad's story. Well, a lot of people don't know. See, we all grew up around Hamilton Park. And we used to have they double sessions up at Hamilton Park. And I remember being up there because, you know, Rodney and Ronald Smith, twin, and them was playing. And Cydney comes up. So Coach Curry's like, oh, yeah, you're a Lindblom guy. Let him come up there. Cydney was running the ball, dog walking dudes. And I'm looking at Coach Curry with his clipboard. Get that SOB such and such. They couldn't put a hand on him. So, you know, you were blessed with an infinite talent, man. You couldn't teach that talent. I used to sit up and watch you on both sides of the ball, and I'm like, how does he do that stuff? So, hey, man, all praises to Allah, man.
What you got, Plank?
Oh,
Yeah,
Plank
to
wanted to
that
ask
point,
you something.
we were talking
thank
about
you.
wearing Converse All Stars. As a matter of fact, my junior year, I didn't have shoes at all. The shoes that I played with were borrowed from Cydney, so he gave me his pair of Converse All Stars, and it was good. It was better than nothing. But on trying to play DB and trying to play what everybody else would call quarterback, I had terrible coverage capability, and as a result, I didn't letter in football or what have you. The day before the season started, my uncle brought me a pair of cleats, and you can see the difference between junior year performance versus senior year. So that little thing makes all the difference as well. So
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
Cydney,
that's an excellent point. Yes, Bernard.
what neighborhood? Just for a point of information, what neighborhood did you play playground football in? Street ball.
Well, on 70th and Union over in what's that, Inglewood or South Inglewood, maybe they call it these days. That's where I was in 8th grade, and that's where I met you, as you recall, because I played on the Union team. Because East Street used to have its team, and you were playing, I believe, on Parnell, and we used to play you guys. But yeah, I was playing with Union back in the late 70s, like 78, when I was in 8th grade, and we were at Lawless Upper Grade Center.
Okay. Hey, so one point of information with Cydney being on a low team, I believe, was Mark Smith on your team that played for Robeson?
Actually, Union is just west of Low. So
Okay.
Low had his own team, and Mark was captain of their team.
Okay.
The next over street was Union, because I played with the Union Raiders, and Lawrence, myself, and a couple other guys were captains of that team. So we were only a block apart, but we did have different teams. Yeah, Mark was pretty good too.
Yeah. Mark ended up being a star player for Robeson High School. And when you talk
Right.
about street ball on 68 in Normal, which I think that was actually the name of their team, was Touche. Robert Spraggins, Jimmy Spraggins, who ended up being the star.
Jimmy Spraggins. Yeah.
And I played for Parnell Chargers. And so Guy and I and Cydney all met in 8th grade. So Cydney was the man on a team that we were trying to stop. And ironically, I was the man on our team. And not that I was the most talented guy on our team, because there was way more talented guys on our team than myself. But I was just the guy that I just wanted to be in the game. So I ended up just running the ball because everybody wanted to tackle, nobody wanted to get hit. So I was just the guy like, hey, if that's how I get the ball, I'll just run the ball. But I can remember a brief story that we had finally played Cydney team to a stalemate. And ironically, we was on this is the last play of the game. If we scored, we won. If we didn't score, Cydney done won.
Right.
And I can remember this play, Cydney and a bunch of them I just said, give me the ball. And they all cracked me at the same time. They hit me so hard that I was the only one still standing when the power cleared, and all them was they all knocked each other off the tackle.
He was like,
right.
Oh, I can still count 9, 15, 28, 27. But you know, here's the deal.
So Bernard, was that the play where you ran like a 70, 80-yard touchdown, and I chased you all the way down the field, but I couldn't close the gap? Is that the play you're talking about?
Yeah. We didn't have a Jomatron.
Right. Yeah, I remember y'all winning that game. Yeah.
Hey, I see.
Man, that was a long time ago. A lot of memories, bro.
Hey, that wasn't speed. That was fear. Great information. All city running back. Nothing like street teams. That's where it started for me. That's all I had football wise. My mom didn't allow me to go out for football because she thought I was a maniac. I broke a guy in the neighborhood's arm in 3 places. I told him I was going to F him up and did so. And he told his mom. They came by the house with him in the cast. My mom was like, did that. Next day was trials and quarters. The guys came to pick me up 10 deep as the Well, the rest
Yeah,
of
that's
them
all we
don't.
can see.
But you know what? But that was y'all's that was AAU for y'all. But the difference being was there was the going joke at Lindblom. Oh, the girls fight more, and then they would play the football teams, and they would see y'all. They like, oh, y'all, hey, y'all, them dudes right there used to play with us. So y'all had notoriety coming into the public league by playing in the city neighborhood, especially through Robeson. You know what I'm saying? You guys had already was on that.
Right.
Yeah, so hey, I'd like to send a shout out to David Nash, who has a Facebook group, Chicago Public League Football History. A lot of this been kind of slowly coming together. A few years ago, I joined this group and I noticed it was a whole lot of historical stuff that was being posted in this group. I mean, pictures, players, articles. David Nash does a good job. Matter of fact, and I feel honored that yesterday David Nash seen this post about this broadcast, and he made me a administrator in that group. It is 1,700 former athletes in it. And another reason I'm honored because there's nobody else in the group that's administrator other than him and I. So for me to have never met him in person, he trusts that I can monitor that group. So shout out to Dave. All right. Hey, now you know we got from 8th grade to high school. And I mean, did you play fall-soft? Because I put 3 years of varsity. Did you play fall-soft football? I mean, how did you get to varsity? Because I don't remember you playing fall-soft.
Yeah, you know, you had Coach Patalino over the Frostsoft at that time when we were freshmen. So I went out for the freshman team, and Coach Patalino, in a public league school, we only had so much equipment. So what he did was he gave the biggest guys first crack at making the team. So I didn't know at the time that if you just kept coming, eventually you were going to get equipment because other guys were going to quit and all that stuff. But since he had given those guys equipment, therefore they got to play, I just assumed that then I didn't make the team. And myself and several other people, you know, we just stopped coming. And obviously we didn't make the team. But no, I never played Frostsoft on the Frostsoft team. I would like to have done so. I can't necessarily say it was the coach's fault. It was kind of my fault. But at the time, I didn't know. I thought he had chosen his team, and I wasn't going to get to play. But no, I never played Frostsoft football.
Okay. And for those who just tuned in to Chicago High School Football Legends, I know you're watching us on the Bears Banner channel. This is actually a spinoff show that we are premiering tonight. And we're reaching out to, matter of fact, Cydney, guess who reached out to me from Tilden? Dempsey Norman.
Who reached out to you from? Really?
Dempsey Norman.
Oh, wow. That's great. Yeah. So he heard about it through the show you mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah, so basically
or the website you mentioned?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had heard from Chicago Public League football history Facebook page.
Right.
And he reached out to me.
Right. Oh, that's great.
Anyway, we've been talking all day, but I'm not going to stay there because we're going to connect all these points together where they all make sense. But so you're on the varsity now as a sophomore, and I'm sure I think this is where you and Plank meet, right? I don't know if y'all met before.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what was it like?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we met on varsity. Yeah. Go ahead.
What was it like as a sophomore on the varsity?
Say it again about sophomore on varsity.
What was it like being a sophomore on the varsity football team?
Well, you know, Bernard, I guess I was real confident when it came to football. I played several sports back in the neighborhood, and I thought I was adept at a few of them, but I thought I was best at football. So, you know, playing with guys on the varsity, I didn't feel intimidated or anything. To be honest with you, playing in the league we had in the neighborhood, and as hard as some of those games were, I kind of felt that some of the players on the neighborhood team, and I hope no one's offended by me saying this, but some of the players were actually better than the ones I met on the varsity. Mm-hmm. But many of those guys never played high school football going forward. But to answer your question, I wasn't intimidated or anything. And actually, since we didn't have many running backs, which was my position, of course, on the varsity that year, right now we're speaking of my sophomore year, which was the 1980 team, I was actually starting for about maybe at least a third of the year. A few weeks, I ended up losing my starting position to Johnson, not Tim Johnson, one of the other Johnsons. Anyhow, he made all section that year. Dwight Johnson, that's correct. Yeah. And then about 4 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after that, of course, I ended up sustaining a season-ending injury. But to answer your question very directly, I felt honored to be on the varsity football team. I love playing football. And as a starter on varsity, I was getting some valuable experience. And I thought maybe I had a future in football beyond high school football even. But, there were tough times trying to hang on to my starting spot. But I had a lot of fun being on varsity that year.
Okay. Yeah. So another question I have, you just mentioned about having an injury, and we all know this is the early 80s. You got an injury in college and you might have been done, that nobody actually had rehab programs, and then, we just kids in Inglewood, right? So we probably didn't even have insurance. We had green cards. I mean, let's keep it real. We had the green cards for welfare at that time. So, I mean, how did you go through rehab and to become the star you became the following season?
Well, there in 1980, I broke my ankle right before the Hubbard game, I think. And it was broken pretty badly. It broken in practice, like I think I said. I was out of school for 6 weeks, literally, sitting at home watching Luke and Laura on, what was that, All My Children? But first time in my life watching what we call the stories back then, or soap operas. And man, those were some lonely times. But finally, 6 weeks were up, and they took the cast off. I still couldn't walk. I had crutches, and God, I had to learn how to try to walk on my own real quick, because as you may remember, I lived on the west side of Chicago, and Lindblom was on the south side. So it actually took me 2 hours to get to school and to get back home. So I used to hop to the bus and get on the bus. But when I got back to school, we had a weight room that didn't have that many weights in it, but it did have some. So I just figured, man, if I lift weights as much as I can, maybe I could build my left ankle back up, because when the cast was finally taken off, my left leg was smaller than the right leg. So along with building my leg back up, I thought maybe if I lift enough weights, I could build my body up enough to sustain the punishment of being a running back. So I just got deep into weightlifting, and not just weightlifting, but running. We probably overdid it. And speaking of as you remember, we had a workout club under Coach Pavlino. I think we called them the producers. So it was me, you, and several other people who were either coming back to play on varsity, and people who wanted to get on varsity. Emerson Bowie, and I think Plank may have been with us too. But yeah, I just kind of worked myself back into shape. And it's funny, my ankle would feel funny whenever it would rain for years. But playing football that next season, I would have to wrap my ankle a lot of times before the games. But it just goes to show you through I guess you'd call it rehab. I didn't know that was the name of it. I just knew you had to lift weights to get better and to re-strengthen my leg. But I did not know that you could rehab to the point where you could even be faster and stronger than you were before. Yeah. But that's really what ended up happening to me going into junior year.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Cydney, you know what? You actually tricked me into the producers club. I mean, Cydney had the injury, and Cydney was like, "Man, I need somebody to keep me motivated, to rehab my ankle." And at that point, I had not made the FASL 2 years in a row, so football was in the past. And so I agreed to just come work out with you. And I'm looking at Cydney, and I never lift weights in my life. And I'm looking at Cydney, and we had went from 8th grade, and I'm looking at this guy, and he's probably jacking up on the bench press at that time, 180 pounds, right? Yeah. And I'm like, I feel embarrassed. I'm like, hold on, let me see where I fit in. So I tried 180 first. I mean, I couldn't even move it. So we keep moving it down. And Cydney never made me feel bad about it. I think I started about 75 pounds on the bench press. But just being there with him, watching him and us running and watching him work through that, man, I admired what he was doing. And I ended up competing with him without really knowing it, because he was not going to keep lifting 180. Then he got to 200 or whatever it was. And I'm still going to be down there at 75. So I just started coming in there between classes, doing a little stuff. I didn't tell them, right? So I'm like, I went with that little knob. It would go that far down from 200 to under 100, right? So eventually I kind of closed the gap a little bit. But anyway, Cydney, one of the things that I noticed that people admired about you that next year was your toughness as a running back. And I got a little clip I want to show. I know it ain't as easy to get clips from that time, but I want to bring a little clip on from that time to show you what we can make out of this clip. And Cydney running the ball.
Yep. And he's gone. Off that single out.
Okay. So that's the most I could get in there. Have you seen yourself run before, Cydney, other than back then?
Not that much. I know I did see a couple of the tapes that Plank has. So I saw myself run a little bit. But last time I really saw myself running was when we would watch film after games. But that was over 40 years ago. So I've not really seen myself run that much, to be honest. Yeah, when I think about running, I kind of see it from the point of view that a person running a football would see it. And, like I was mentioning to Bernard when we talked a couple nights ago, a lot of times we watch Monday Night Football and football on Sundays, and you see some of the moves that the pros would master, and you go out, play ball, and try to master it. And I found out there was this guy used to play for the Baltimore Colts named Lydell Mitchell. And he perfected the spin move. He was a smaller guy, and he was excellent at the spin move. People would hit him. He used the force of their hit to spin out of the tackle. So I realized that was a move I could use. And as you know, Coach Paolino insisted that we run a certain type of way, right? Didn't matter if you were fast or not. He wanted you running over people. That might have held some of us back because most of us weren't big people, but I knew in order to please him, I was going to have to turn into what essentially was a power runner. But I was 5'10", 165 pounds, which is not power runner weight. But I think, just growing up in such tough circumstances, it just kind of mentally made me tough enough to take a lot of punishment, and for that matter, give out a lot of punishment. It really was at the point where I kind of liked it at times. I know that sounds sadistic, but yeah, I used to like collisions, man. My body was able to hold up under all those collisions that we took.
Okay. Now, Cydney, in your junior year, Lindblom plays Roberson twice that year, So I know at one point you mentioned being on 70th and I think you said Union or Low. And then when he was in high school, for those who might not totally follow the story, he had moved to the West Side. That's why he mentioned the West Side at one point. So I have to make sure like people like did he forget where he lived at. But Cydney had actually moved to the West Side by the time he was in high school. But anyway, now we're facing. It looked like he's spinning. He may end up dropping.
But Plank had something. I think he had a comment.
Okay, what you got, Plank?
Yeah, actually, going back to that producers, it just shows you how, a lot of times people that you're peers with can actually be leaders that instill other characteristics in you. I can remember I was a junior, you and Cydney were sophomores, and, Cydney showed up one day saying that he wanted to, go to the producers to lift weights. And I was actually not going to go because I figured I had already made the team or whatever. And I decided to go with him. And Cydney ended up, we had a brand new universal machine. Cydney bench pressed the stack, which was 270 pounds as a 165-pound high school guy. I figured I was going to get down there and try. And the most I was able to lift was 130 pounds. So to watch him putting up that much weight, it was ridiculous. I decided at that point I had to work harder, and I had to, have somebody else that I tried to compete against. And Cydney probably didn't know it at the time, but I decided I was never going to quit because, he was the direct guy I was looking at all the time, and I wanted to make sure I didn't disappoint him.
Hey, we're not going to upset Mark Chan, man. See, Eric Frazier didn't lift weights with them. He was up under the building lifting the building. Eric Frazier was
right now, about three blocks. It used to be on 64th and Walcott. Eric Frazier pushed it to 61st Street. So
I love that brother to death. We bowled together. We spent a lot of time together. He was like the gentle giant, but that dude right there.
Hey, Mark said you was a small Larry Zonka. Hey,
are you talking about Mark Smith?
Oh,
no, it's one of the people watching right now, Mark Chin.
Yeah,
he's watching
all world
basketball.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Can you see this right here, Cydney?
I do see it, Gene. Thank you.
Okay, hey, so what memories does these bring back? Okay, what's on the left part of his cutoff is this is when you were selected to the Public League All-Star game, and for those who could see it out there that's viewing, you actually see Keith's name in there too as being All City. So this is the All City, and I think somewhere near the bottom you'll see All Section. But Cydney looked like he was picked for the third team for the All-Star team. And Cydney, and to the far, I guess it'll be to our right. It looked like you're standing with Kenny McReynolds. What's that about? What's the story?
Well, I was named Player of the Week for Chicago Public League. That week we had just beaten Tilden. This was 1981, I believe November. We had just beaten Tilden in the Chicago Public League playoffs at semifinals. And they had given me Player of the Week because I had scored 2 touchdowns against Tilden, who were a great team at that time. 2 touchdowns in overtime. So, I was very honored they gave me Player of the Week. And when you got Player of the Week, for Chicago Public League, they would do a radio interview on WBMX, which was the radio station back then in Chicago that started house music.
Yes.
Later they became I think they got another name, but so Kenny McReynolds and the other gentleman was the sports director at WBMX. His name might be in the article, but I don't recall it right offhand. They came up to Lindblom, and that picture was taken along the wall in the cafeteria. And, I really hadn't done a lot of standing in front of people. And so I'm standing up there at everyone in the lunchroom gazing, which I don't blame them, but it was very humbling having everyone's eyes on me, but Yeah, that's what that trophy was about. And but yeah, that game, that Tilden game, it sent us into the public league championship game in 1981 at Soldier Field. And back then, as you know, the public league semifinals, finals, and subsequently the prep bowl would all be played at Soldier Field.
Okay. Hey, this look like this is the picture, right?
That's right here with a block. Yeah, right there.
Right
Is
there.
that Cook running ball?
Right,
Is that
right.
Cook? Is that Cook with the football? No,
No, that's Cydney.
Not Cydney. Yeah,
That's Mitch. That's Mitch. He running.
Mitch. Yes, Mitch. Yeah, Mitch. It sure is.
Hey, when the last time?
Yeah, I think with the man, I don't think I've seen that in about 40 years, man.
There's the Chuck Taylors. There's the Chuck Taylors.
There you go.
Exactly. I think that was the picture they put in the yearbook, if I recall.
Correct.
But yeah, wow, that brings back a whole lot of memories. And it's as old as that picture is, as clear as it is, it's really remarkable. Wow.
It was in the yearbook, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that year had the distinction of us. We had a player that won the Chicago Sun-Times Player of the Week, the first game. That was Mike Neal, because he caught a touchdown pass and got a sack at the end of the game. So that was something that they weren't used to doing. And as well as the last game, that's where Cydney ended up scoring those 2 touchdowns in overtime against Tilden, who was coincidentally, they made a prediction of the game before we played, and they said it would be a good game if Tilden doesn't blow us out. So as soon as they said that, we got a little bit of angry, and Cydney was definitely he was easy for me to anger as well. So he said, I'm going to put this whole team on my back, and we gonna see what happens.
Man, that game was tough. That was a tough game. Tilden was a tough team. I take my hat off to Tilden. I mean, other than we had a tough game with Bogan that we had lost, Tilden probably was the toughest game after we got on the streak, because for those, I know we're talking about almost 40 years ago, but once we got on the road that year, I was a reserve at that time, but I got a lot of time because Cydney and Plank in the first unit, they were killing people defensively and offensively. It was games, it was 48, and people couldn't believe Limblom, this smart school, was actually dominating, and we actually had a small squad. And Cydney, you mentioned something about the interview for Kenny McReynolds. If you don't mind sharing some of the behind the scenes stuff that happened to show how different it is when you go to a school where academics is first. I mean, what happened when they got there that day?
Well, I was in. I was told a day before that they would come, that I won the award, and that they would come and interview me. So I was excited about it, and when that day came, I was in my English class with Mr. Rumlinsky, and it was fourth period, fifth period, sixth period, and maybe even seventh. Those were lunch periods. So it was fourth period. My lunch period was going to be fifth. But of course, it's not often you get a chance to be on the radio and be featured in the Chicago Defender and stuff like that. So you would think that your teacher would if Kenny McReynolds and his boss were there to interview you, you would think your teacher would just let you out of class and go ahead and do it. But I went up to Mr. Rumlinsky and I told him, they want to interview me, and I need to go, if that's okay. He said, no, you're not going anywhere. English class is more important. Sit down, and you can go at the end of class. And I sat down and took the rest of my class. And I went fifth period, which was my lunch period. Fortunately, the gentleman who came to interview me, they decided to wait. But if you think about it, they didn't have to wait. But that's the way it was at Limblom. Yeah. Limblom was an academic powerhouse, not an athletic one.
You know what? We talk about something too. I'm trying to remember who I had a conversation with last week. we're talking about, I said, a show of hands, how many people fell asleep in freshman year of college, and everybody with the Lindblom raised their hand because they gave me like I had a calculus class or whatever, but I had pre-calc. And by the time I got there, man, I was partying so much, I still got an A because you start looking at class like your freshman year. It's like, oh, that was sophomore year. That was, Mr. Kennedy, or that was Mr. Bruce. And it was a blessing to go to that school because it taught us not only how to study, but it also taught us how to, direct our time, study, organize ourselves. So, but I lost it all now, though.
Okay. Hey, I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. You're not watching Bears Banner tonight. You're actually watching a spin-off premiere broadcast of Chicago High School Football Legends. We'll probably be back with a Bears Banner show next week, talking about OTAs and etc. But tonight we're talking to Cydney Muhammad. And back in the 80s, he was known as Cydney Payne. Cydney had rushed for approximately 2,100 yards in his high school career, over 35 touchdowns. He was a punt returner, kick returner, running back, and cornerback. The guy never got any time. At one point in the game, he was so tired from doing all that. I remember Plank looking over him and said, "Don't sit next to me. You smell like smoke." He got burnt.
That's right.
Oh man.
Hey, we pushed each other, We didn't lie to each other. We told.
I got a question for you. Of all of those games you played, who hit you the hardest?
Well, I can think of 2 times. I think a lot of times get hit hard, but 2 stand out. Our junior year, when we played King, in the second game we played King, which was our first game in the public league playoffs. I was running the ball and through the middle, and I had a collision with one of their linebackers, and he had engulfed me. He was on my back, so as I was going down, my toe went a certain direction, and I broke my big toe on my right foot. Didn't come out of the game, though. I didn't realize it was broken. And, we were so obsessed with winning that you just didn't have time to think about being injured. If you could breathe, you could play.
Wow, yo.
But I know that sounds crazy. But that injury bothered me for about a weekend. Well, it bothered me for a long time, but it bothered me to the point where it affected my running for about a week and a half. So that next week we played Calumet. I wasn't very effective because I couldn't push off on that toe. But I had gained my strength back by the time we played Orr that following week. The second time I was hit the hardest was the game we were talking about earlier against Tilden at Soldier Field in the public league semifinals. The final play of that game where we ended up, well, it wasn't the final play of the game. It was our final play on offense where it was tied and the coach gave me a draw play on the 10-yard line. I just, it's the only time in my life where I went into what I've heard pro athletes call a zone. And it is real. I'm sure a lot of you all have experienced it. It's that time where your senses are so high that you're viewing things in slow motion.
Yep.
And I remember that running in slow motion, and everyone else was in slow motion. I guess it's just a state of mind. I remember weaving and weaving and weaving. And when I got to the end zone, there was a cornerback or linebacker waiting for me. And he speared me in the left thigh. And I remember doing a 360-degree somersault into the end zone. And when I fell, it felt like something, my left thigh had exploded. And I just remember breathing hard. I don't know if I still had the ball or not. To be honest with you, I didn't even know I had scored. All I could feel was pain. Now, Plank jokes with me about Coach Catalino coming out and giving me smelling salt. But to be honest with you, I don't even remember smelling salt. But from that hit, my thigh was. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a bruised thigh. And unfortunately, that kept me from being effective that next week in the championship game against Robeson. I really could hardly, I couldn't run as fast, to be honest, and couldn't push off as hard. But yeah, those were the two hardest hits that I remember. Although there were several hits I remember on kickoff, people coming down full speed, just crushing me and knocking me under fences and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess since the other team probably had gotten the word that when I ran kickoffs or punch back, I would never fair catch the ball. If you remember,
that's soft, fair catching the ball.
Oh no, Plank went out.
Hey, but anyway, I know Cydney having a little technical difficulties. He might drop, but he'll be right back on. Cydney mentioned about that, and it is not an excuse, but I definitely want to share this that I never really thought about it until Sunday when we talked about a mean guy and Zimmy, that when we went into that championship game against Robeson, Cydney actually came in that game with a broke toe and a bruised thigh. And from that King game all through the playoff, the coach would take duct tape.
Yep.
And tape his and tape his shoes to try to stabilize his toe, but they still gave him the ball the same amount of times they would give him. So Cydney had a reputation for being a tough guy and a tough runner, but he was tough because he didn't complain about that in that scenario. But when we talking about the Tilden game, if I remember, to kind of put a narrative to that, then we moved to the next point, was that game, I want to say, was 6-6 or 8-8 in regulations. That's how tough Tilden was. The game was tied at the end of regulation at Soldier Field. We did sudden death. They scored, we scored. Then that play where Cydney scored, I want to say that was 4th down. That was our last chance to score. And he wasn't trying to do the somersault like these guys do now, right? Where they just flip and just showing off. Yeah, he got flipped into the end zone. But in the next, when Tilden got the ball, I want to say, Plank, was that you who broke up a pass or something to end that game?
I recovered a fumble and ran it back.
Right.
Was in the game. Ain't that something that got both guys on here? So Plank gonna be part of Football Legends. Hey, we gonna interview you. I just didn't want to start with the whole. So, hey, the next
and there's I was just gonna say that there's a reason he's called Plank, and I'm sure during that broadcast y'all will go into that, but it's a pretty interesting reason, and so yeah, you're looking at a legend in his own right. So
yeah. Man, here's the following week, the end of the season. Man, Robeson Rumps Limbalone to City Crown. They beat us 38-8. The only touchdown scored in that game on our side was Reverend Michael Neal. That was a tough game. We played against, you know what? I want to say Pat Wilburn, for whatever reason, started at quarterback, but I don't believe he was their normal quarterback.
He was a wide receiver.
He was their receiver, but I think he started quarterback in that game. I think something had happened with Tim Spencer. I think Tim Spencer was the starter that year. I don't know, was it academics? Because we actually had that same issue. We actually lost a player. I won't say his name, but we lost our punter to an academic suspension for that game, which ended up costing us a lot because when we had the punt, we had a couple of punts that went 5 yards. We had a missed punt. Then we had our punter trying to show off his running skills, and he got tackled a few times. But needs to say, we never got the offense going. And Cydney, I want to ask you this, and Plank as well. Do y'all dream about that game? That's the game I dream about. I've tried to DVD it in my mind to get alternative ending, and it always ends the same way with us losing.
Wow.
I do think about that game sometimes. You know, it goes to show you one of the biggest sports differences in the world, to me, is the difference between being number one and being number two.
Mm-hmm.
If we had won that game, we would have gone down in history. But we didn't. I think, unfortunately, our coaches they didn't, in my humble opinion, make the adjustments needed, because we actually had quite a bit of talent on that team. And I think things kind of got to the point, since I was having some personal success, where the coaches just by default, when it came to offense, they just gave me the ball. But now I'm not complaining, because I loved running the ball. And if you wanted to give it to me every single time, I certainly wasn't going to turn it down, and didn't turn it down. But there were other people who could have been effective. And at the very least, it would have forced Robeson to have to do other things on defense. And when it came to us being on defense, there was some other things we could have done. Robeson was not, as I recall, and I think you said, Bernard, we lost 38 to 8. Robeson was not 38 to 8 better than us, because if you recall, we played them in the preseason and we did lose, but I think the difference was like 10 or 12 points. Right. And in the preseason, we really hadn't become the team that we became later, because in that preseason game, we weren't on our winning streak yet. So 38 to 8 was really an anomaly. But since the situation happened with the punter and some other things that happened, heck, I got burnt a lot by what's the brother's name? Went on to play for the Dallas Cowboys. He was their running back. Mickey Pruitt. I was covering him. And if I can get into the story real quick, I was playing left cornerback, strong side corner. So they had a play called a halfback down out and up. It was a long pass play. But the interesting thing about it wasn't to a receiver, it was to a running back. So the running back would go up the field, go out to his right if he was on the right, and then turn upfield for a bomb from the quarterback. Now, Coach Manny told me that the running back would come out into the flat, then turn upfield. But what he failed to tell me, and I should have picked up, was that the running back would actually go from the far back position, the high back position. He would sneak through the middle of the line. Then once he got beyond the linebackers, he would cut out to the flat. Then he turned upfield. So what was happening was, from my cornerback position, by the time he got past the linebackers in the crowd, I couldn't see him. I was looking for him in front of me in the flat. That's why they kept getting long yardage on that play. So I got burnt maybe about 3 times by Mickey Pruitt in that game. So I definitely contributed to us losing. But I just, if the coach could have pulled my coattail, say, Sid, he's not coming to the flat. He's actually coming through the middle. And of course, I can't blame him totally, because I should have seen him going through the middle. But of course, he was going through such a mass of people. Once the play started, I couldn't even see the guy. But I guess that's neither here nor there. But yeah, we definitely were not. They definitely weren't that much better than we were. But in the end, you have to give Robeson credit. They really were a great team.
Yeah. You know what amazing thing about Robeson team, and Plank, I want to come right to you as soon as I finish this, is their school had been like built in, I think, 1978. And they used to be Parker.
Yeah.
Robeson ended up being a smaller school than Parker. So right. The school didn't have sufficient space. They didn't have a weight room at Robeson. Those guys used to go to the YMCA on 65th in Low, I believe,
Low or something like that.
Yeah. And I would see those guys on Saturday going to the game. But anyway, going back to the week of the game, it was the championship game. Public League was the day after Thanksgiving. So anyway,
Right.
that week, I believe we had Monday off because we would get the day out at the game that Monday all the time. So Monday I come home from school, Robeson out there practice. We didn't have practice. And they out there saying, kill the comeback kid. Kill the comeback kid. I'm like, I wonder what they talking about, right? So anyway, we end up I'm sorry, it's 3. So anyway, Tuesday we practice. I'm coming home right at the bus from Limblom. They still practicing. Like, what's going on, man? We didn't practice. I done rode the bus home, 61st and Walcott. Kill the combat kid. Kill the combat kid. Then one of them looked over because I knew so many of us because I lived right across the street from them. They was like, hey, there go one of the number one players right there. And they say he's spying on. I said, no, man, I live across the street. They said, yeah, he lived across the street. Then I said, hey, man, who is the combat kid? They was like, number 22.
22, yup.
Cydney Payne. I say, why y'all call him the comeback kid? Because they said the first game, we didn't really realize he wasn't that good. But he came back, man. He one of the best backs in the city. So we call him the comeback kid. We going to kill him. We going to kill him. Then Coach Curry started yelling, kill him, kill him, kill him. I was like, man, this dude's serious, man. But what you have playing that week as far as that game?
To answer your question, do I have nightmares about that game? I absolutely still do. One of the things that really bothered me about the game, we talked about the situation with our punter, and it just shows how the final score could not indicate how close the teams were. We gave up. They blocked 3 punts, and we ended up going down at halftime, and the score was 32-0. Mm-hmm. They had scored 32 points with 52 off total yards of offense.
Yep.
So basically, every time they got the ball, they had to go within 5 yards to get a touchdown. So I don't care what defense, the 85 Chicago Bears can't necessarily stop you 8 plays from the 2-yard line. So it still bothers me today. We should ask him for a rematch, man. Forget
it. Hey, we can play this game now.
I hear you, man.
No, these days y'all be doing a step. Y'all be doing some step offs.
Right.
Oh man.
They say meet you at the step or step. We have a step off as a rematch, the Super Bowl.
But you know what? Let me ask you guys a question, which is interesting because, like I was talking off camera, me, Bernard, and Cydney have about almost 140 years of friendship. We knew each other when we were like 12. We went to Lawless, you know. And the interesting part, the blessing for me from a baseball standpoint, is I grew up around Hamilton Park, and they'll even tell you some of the best players that we had in every respective sport didn't even play varsity. They was gangbangers. It was folks or whatever it was. But these dudes could play. Right. But let me ask you guys, how did Inglewood shape you guys as far as your ability to play football and actually at the speed of which, you know, other players have come in to play varsity ball? And that's directed to you as well, playing, like growing up around the way. How did that affect how you guys were able to adjust and acclimate to the speed of varsity football?
Well, you know, Guy, like I kind of mentioned earlier, I just felt like by the time that I started playing varsity football, it was pretty much in terms of intensity on the same level as our street ball league, as far as the hard hitting, of course, minus the pads. But consider on the street ball team that you're referring to, we didn't even have pads. So I think that's why a lot of Lindblom's best players came from rougher neighborhoods like Inglewood. So it was a mentality, and I think growing up in a tough situation in places like Inglewood, it certainly kind of shaped you into being able to be tough enough to excel at high school football.
Right. Hey, for those who just tuned in, I want to put Cydney's stats back on the screen for those who might have tuned in late. You can see it right there. Cydney rushed for over 2,000 yards in his career at Limblom. That's just from the backfield. He had more yards than that as a punt returner and a kickoff returner, all city, all section, etc. Also, Cydney, you mentioned pads. I want to ask a couple of questions, and you can kind of answer all of them as you go as we wrap up. Had you ever wore pads before you played at Lumberlone? Also, how did you balance academics and being a star player? Third question is, you was a humble guy, but you was a star at Lumberlone. I mean, at least in our class, people. I mean, there's people still now when they speak your name, you were their fond memory of Lemblon. If they had no other memory, because they said that year not only we were smart, let me excuse my French, we kicked ass on the football field too.
Yep.
Well, I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. I think I heard most of your question. You were kind of asking how I balance academics with athletics. Is that what you're saying? Or maybe I didn't hear all of your questions.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, one of my sisters, I have several sisters. One is named Estella. And growing up, Estella was excellent in school, even though, we grew up in a rough situation, coming up from Mississippi, then moving up to various hoods in Chicago. But I noticed that Estella, to me, she was always the quintessential classy person. One thing that made her so classy was that she loved school and she excelled in school. So growing up as a kid, I wanted to be like her in that I wanted to be good academically. That's why I ended up going to Lindblom. But in terms of keeping my grades up, I never wanted to be pictured as the dumb jock. I think sometimes that could be an oxymoron because, you don't have to be dumb because you're a jock. And one of the ways that I would make sure I gave sufficient time to study, which we needed at Lindblom, was that, like I mentioned earlier, when I would get out of school, by the time I played varsity football, I was living on the west side of Chicago. So it would be a 2-hour bus ride to get after practice, leave at about 5 something, if I recall. I get home close to 8. But while I would ride home on the bus, I would sit in the back of the bus and I would do my homework. And all that I didn't finish in those 2 hours, when I get up in the morning and come back to school, I would sit in the back of the bus and I'd do my homework. So each day I had 4 hours to study, because by the time I got home in the evening, it was time to go to bed, go to bed, take a shower, blah, 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 and come back. So I was really only home for 8 or 9 hours on weekdays. And, but yeah, I would consistently put in my study time on the CTA buses. But I thought it was very important to be academically inclined as well as athletically inclined. I think I like both equally. I love football, but academics are very important to me.
Okay. Now, who are some of the players that you kind of admired from a distance that was playing at the same time?
Well, I was certainly a big fan of Carl Boyd from Julian.
Yeah.
His speed was outstanding. One of the reasons I admired him was because, junior year, I certainly had more touchdowns than he did. I don't know if I had more yards than he did. Maybe we were kind of even. But Carl was so fast that, Julian used to run the wishbone back then. That's an offensive formation. He was so fast. He just outrun people. So if he got 100 yards in a game, he'd probably hardly be hit. If I got 100 yards in a game, I probably broke 100 tackles. But, of course I'm exaggerating, but all those hits, they take a toll on your body. So I certainly admired his talent. Certainly at Robeson, Jimmy Spraggins, Touche, definitely admired him. And even before the time we played high school football, Robeson had some legendary teams in the late 70s with people like Roger Threat, they called him Treat, Head, who was their quarterback, and a great linebacker like Fabre Collins and Eddie Holmes. Those guys were my heroes living around Robeson. Man, these guys were legends, and
Mike
Jones. That really what made me they made me want to play high school football. What are you about to say, Bernard?
No, I just said Mike Jones. We called him Purdue.
Exactly. I forgot about him. Yeah, yeah. Purdue used to hang out on our block on 70th and Union. I think he had a girlfriend around there. I remember one day I was standing in a circle. I was in 8th grade, maybe ninth. And we were standing in a circle and we were talking to Purdue. And I was saying, real good, cool guy, man. I remember, man, just standing there in awe of this guy. And I was thinking, man, oh, one day, I could be all city, all state like him. I didn't make all state, but yeah, Purdue is one of the great receivers in public league history. Later on, I saw him playing for the Wisconsin Badgers. I don't know if he made pro ball, but I used to watch him on Saturdays play for Wisconsin.
No,
that's nice, man. See, that's why we doing this show. I mean, because I want to make sure our story is told and is recorded and put down in the memory.
Yeah.
Because during that time, the record keeping was not as good as you have now. When we had film, like just even the film I showed earlier, those games were shot on 16 millimeter. And it had no sound. It had no sound in those games, and sometimes they may pick up the announcer if it was one in that game, or just the sound of the audience. So if you end up getting one of those games, you don't have any sound from, or somebody just put some music over those games. But Cydney, also I want to ask you, senior year, he had another stellar year, and I remember how one point when the season over, I go to the athletic office, and coach telling me some people saw some film on me and they wanted some more film, and I was like, "What?" And they was like, "Yeah, they was here to see Cydney." You probably didn't see them, but they was asking for film. But I can remember on several occasions going in there, and Coach Torian saying it was a school there looking at film at you. And I know it's different then than it is now, because they recruit those kids, sending them text messages, etc. And we didn't have the film like they have now, because they have the film ready. But did you ever just thought about playing college football at all?
Well, before my senior year, I dreamed about playing college football. It was one of the things I definitely wanted to do. In fact, since I was a small child, I wanted to play college football. So I was a big college football fan. I started watching college football back in '74 when Archie Griffin won 2 Heisman trophies. But, and I try to sum this up real quick. It's kind of a long story. I'll make it a short story. As you know, win and loss wise, we had a rough time our senior year. In fact, we ended up with 3 wins, 6 losses. We did make the playoffs, but we were beaten in the first round by Simeon. One of the reasons that year was so tough was because my sophomore and junior year on varsity, our head coach was Coach Meddy, as you all know. Coach Meddy, and I mentioned race for a minute, and I'll tell you why. Coach Meddy was a white guy, pretty good coach. And Coach Meddy retired from coaching football after my junior year. And Coach Torian was lobbying to become the head football coach. Now, one thing we found out later was that Coach Torian really didn't have enough football knowledge to be a head football coach. But he really wanted to be the first Black head football coach at Lindblom. That was his thing. So it was kind of political to him. As youngsters, it wasn't political to us. We just wanted to win. Right. So whoever they made coach, of course, we were going to have to accept it. We didn't have anything against Coach Torian becoming a coach. But later on, we found out he didn't have enough knowledge to really do the job on the level we needed to win more games. But anyhow, to wrap what I'm saying up, there would be times when we would lose games. I remember we lost to Hubbard, I think it was 48-0. Hubbard was not even a powerhouse. They kicked the crap out of us. And this was one of those games where after the game, Coach Torian would come to the locker room. He'd be talking to us, and he would stand up there crying and accusing us of not playing hard because he was black. And he would say we played hard for that white man, meaning Coach Meddy, the year before, but we wouldn't play hard for him because he was black. You know, situations like that had a very negative effect on me. Here I am, a child, trying to get my education, come up out of the ghetto. You know, I in essence, I have my own problems, man. And you're the grown man is in his late 40s talking about we won't play for him because he's black. The whole team is black. We just got our butts stomped. We're totally embarrassed. But he never said we lost because of him. You know, we didn't make the plays when we had to. Maybe we didn't get the coaching we needed to. There were a whole lot of reasons we got beat. But I assure you, it wasn't because he was black. We didn't miss a tackle because Torian was black. And he did this at about 3 games I could think of. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, all men are flawed. Some more flawed than others. And the idea of playing college football and dealing with some coach that has these kind of issues, God forbid I go to a university where there's a white coach who doesn't like black players and all this type of foolishness. I thought that since I was pretty good academically, I didn't necessarily have to be an athlete to get the chance to go to college. So I made the decision, even before that season ended, my senior year ended, that I would give up playing football and just go to college on academics. And that's the way that played out. And the reason I never really talked a whole lot about football in the last 40 years, you know, we talk about it from time to time. Mm-hmm. I never wanted to be seen as Al Bundy before Al Bundy, if you notice. And, you know, it was a really big change for me, man, because most people who knew me as an athlete.
Yeah.
But when I left Limbo and went to Western, I just kind of had to remake myself. But it was a choice I made. No one made me make it. And I just wanted to be responsible enough in that I made that choice to just, you know, go on with life, just being a non-athlete. You know, sometimes I look back on it and wonder what could have been. What you all may not know is I got a little attention from University of Michigan and a decent amount of attention from Southern Illinois University down in Carbondale.
Grambling too.
But I made it pretty clear that I didn't want to play college football. I'm not saying I would have gone on to Michigan and been a star or whatever, but they did have some interest in me. And I guess if I still had a drive and fire for football, maybe I could have gone there and played. But who knows? We'll never know now. But I don't feel bad about the choice I made.
First of all,
thanks for sharing that.
Just to interject, anybody that ever watched you hop as a Q on the floor knew that you were athletic. So forget all of that about you not being an athlete or what have you. People saw. I remember you would spit on your head and jump out the gym. So you can fool somebody else. I know better.
See, y'all can sit up here and listen. Y'all listen to Cydney talk, and I'm gonna tell you. And it ain't just because I love him as my boy. I've been knowing him since like 12, 13 years old. He was one of the most humble stars I've ever met. He made everybody around him. And I can tell you this because when I was in Limbo, I played baseball, but these were my guys. And everybody would always know that, they my dudes. But Cydney treated everybody exactly the same. Cydney, the only way that if you walked out of a building, came in the building and came in, that the only way you would know that Cydney was a star football player is if he had his jersey on. If he was on, you wouldn't know it. He treated everyone the same way. So hearing him say that is making us laugh because he's so humble. But man, bless you, brother. Bless you.
Yeah, because I want to mention this, that I'm one of the people that keep articles, and I've shared with Cydney over the years and Keith and different people. Matter of fact, even today I heard from Dempsey Norman from Tillman Tilden, and I actually sent him some articles because he had asked me what did I have. So Cydney's name was in the Chicago Tribune, the Sun-Times, and the Defender on a regular basis. Yeah. So it wasn't like he was John Doe in the school. Like say for our class, he was our star. He was that dude. Yeah. And you would have not have known he was that star. But one of the things I wanted to bring up is when people who didn't play sports may not know this thing, but there's lessons that we pick up as sports people that we take in life. And I would say 2 lessons I learned from watching Cydney, since the program is an interview for him, is 1, perseverance. He persevered through that injury, and he overcame the injury and became a starter on the team. And also mentioning that the weights, he actually did not just walk in the weight room just lifting like Plank said, the whole stack. He didn't just walk in one day and do that. He actually gradually grew into that. So I learned how to work hard. And for me, for athletics, it also, I proved to myself that I could work hard academically, because I was just an average student, right? So I found out that I could overcome stuff, and it was really actually from when I went from lifting 75 pounds to getting to over 200 pounds on the bench press, right? I never got the whole stack up like Cydney, but that was the motivation. Hey, Plank, what was your lessons that you learned in playing sports?
Well, you know what? The lessons that I learned was, just meeting all of you all, is to do a good job, hopefully, of choosing your friends. We have been friends for well over 40 years. Cydney's the toughest guy I've ever met in my life. I used to watch him and just be in awe. And, as his peer, I don't have any problem letting people know that. I used to, I would listen to Bernard, and I could see your intelligence and your intellect, Zim's leadership. So I've been very fortunate in my life and just choosing my friends well. And, my hat is off to you guys, and I continue to just, be humble by the things that you all added to my life. Okay. So I know it's going off on a different protocol, but, that's just the truth.
Yeah. Hey, Guy, what was, I know you was a baseball guy, but what was your, lessons that you learned from sports? And we'll come to Cydney last.
It's never about you. You're a contributing factor of everything. And I think that the thing is, once you start, this guy told me something. He said it's okay to believe in yourself, but once you start believing in yourself, that's when the ship sinks. I've seen a lot of very pretentious guys who were star players, walked around like their chest was out, and then they got injured and couldn't play no more. And all the fanfare went away, and they didn't know how to adjust because everybody was telling them how great they were. But when you have a level of humility and you make it about everybody else, and I can even take a thing that what Sid just say. Sid was like, I'd be happy with getting all the plays, but what about everybody else? That's the guy that you want to follow. That's the guy you want at the head of your squad. And I'm going to tell you, when you watch a guy like him in practice and he's playing like it's the greatest game of his life in practice, you as a more marginal player, you're going to get better because you're going to be like, hey, well, if he's that guy and he's showing up like that, I'm on this end, I need to show him proof. But the thing I'll tell you about you 3 guys who've been knowing since we were kids, but here's an interesting Plank story. I remember homecoming. I had a hoodie that you made me, Bernard, and he said Plank had it. And I ran into him. I'd always known Plank through high school. He was like a year ahead of me. Always like exchange pleasantries. But I got the sweater from that point. We're talking about a homecoming game like in 2009, 2010. And we just kind of gravitated towards each other because it was like a continuum, because he knew that I was real tight with you and Sid. And it wasn't like he had to kind of side eye me because they knew you guys' character. And you guys, I was blessed enough to be friends of yours. And he was able to look at me like, oh, if that's his guy, he's going to be my guy. And we've been like this ever since, although I'm still scared of him. But that's not the point, though. I love y'all like brothers, man. And you guys have done nothing but enrich my life, man. I appreciate the heck out of y'all, man.
Thank you. Hey, what about you, Cydney? And also, Cydney, what are you doing now? I know you're a college graduate. What are you doing now? If you could add that onto the final part of this program as we wrap it up.
Yeah, in terms of your first question, athletics taught me how important it is to work hard, which allows you to maximize whatever talent you have. But talent without hard work really doesn't benefit you a whole lot. And yeah, I never. I think as a leader on the athletic field and in other walks of life, being a prima donna is not going to get the most out of yourself or the people around you. In the end, you're just another human being. You can't believe the newspaper clippings because you take football, for instance, when you break it down, you go into the next game, people are not going to let up on you because they saw your name in the paper last week, newspaper. That's probably why they're going to hit you harder. So you can't relish in your own accolades. You're just a regular person, regular player, and you play hard. And hopefully after that game, you will have reproven yourself. But your second question, I have a long haul trucking company. We have about 30 trucks right now. I live in San Antonio, Texas. That's where our headquarters are. And when I went to Western, I got a business degree, and it's certainly helpful. It has been helpful down through the years, and it's helpful now. But in terms of what we were talking about earlier, to tie it into what we're talking about now, giving up football and concentrating on my academics, it worked out well for me. But mainly because, I worked hard, I had a great group of friends who always supported me because most of us went to college together who are on this panel here. And like Guy said, we were friends before high school, most of us. So had a great support system. And look, it's just been an honor, Bernard, that you let me come on the show and talk about my story. And another reason that it is an honor is because coming up in my family, being the first college graduate, a lot of times I would kind of live in a different world from my brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, and meaning they didn't really know what I was into, what I was about. I have several of my family members watching today, and they've heard through the years that I did well playing high school sports. And this gives them an opportunity. This show gives them an opportunity to learn a little bit about what my brothers and sisters knew a little bit. But I have, I think, at least 60 nieces and nephews who only heard about what I did in high school. But some of them are watching this program, and they get the opportunity to see me in a light that they probably just heard about, and it really wasn't real to them. Because God knows I never talked much about it. But so I appreciate you having me on, and Plank and Guy. You guys have always been wonderful to me. I love you all. And again, thank you, Bernard. I really appreciate it, brother.
You ain't got to pop your collar. That's what we here for. Here you go, Sid. Bang.
So like I said, this program is the premier show of Chicago high school football legends, man. Man, Cydney, even though I've known you all this time, man, some of the things you said, it's the first time I'm hearing it. And there's other people out here, man, that have similar stories, man, people need to hear their stories. So I'm reaching out to the Dempson Normans. I'm reaching out to the Carl Boys. I'm reaching out to if Mark Dean, some of those guys who were our rivals at that time, and let them come in to share their story. And one of the things I reached out to Mark, to Dempson Norman about was if we could come together as a group, and that would be fantastic. Tilden team and Lemberlone team, and we there as a group, maybe breaking some bread, and we talk about that game. Because just like we have nightmares about that Robeson game, I'm sure they got nightmares about the game we had with them. Because that was the difference of them being in the city championship and going home, and it was separation was only one play. We scored. And I'm sure in the next year they went in the state, and I think they lost in the second round or something. But they didn't end up getting that championship experience that we got to talk about, because unblown history, we were the last team still to reach the city championship, and that was 1981. And think about, that's historical now, that there has not been a unblown team to make it far. So hey, any of y'all got any closing words before we close out? And anything you got, Plank guy?
I do. One thing I would say, take what this gentleman has spoken to you about, Brother Muhammad, and try to apply it to your life, because I think it's very relevant. You know, you look at the pitfalls and see the one thing that you notice is everything that he went through, but you never heard him say he was disenfranchised. You never heard him say he was going to quit. Use that in your life. Don't sit out here with all the social media, all the internet, and all the resources that you have. There's no reason for you not to succeed. And us as black men, and especially you and you black ladies and children out here, if you can't do it for yourself, do it for somebody you love. That's all I got.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
If y'all didn't hear him, that brother said he owned 30 18-wheelers. For those who didn't hear it, 30. Not 3, 30.
Yes, sir.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Appreciate it. You had anything to say, Plank?
No, y'all got me, man.
All right.
I'm gonna start crying, man. So I don't want people to remember things like that.
That's not possible. Not play. Go find a neighbor and just stick them, man. That's how you'll feel better.
We'll see y'all in a few days for Bears Banner, and then I'll be working on my next podcast for this Chicago High School Legends. I'm coming for you, Mike Neal. Also, I'm coming for you, Terrence Cook. I'm coming for you, Mitch. I'm coming
Eric
for
Frazier.
you, Simmons. Hey, Fabric Collins. I'm coming for you. Man, I'm coming for you, Mickey Pruitt. Matter of fact, I'm going to try to reach out to Chris Zorick. We coming for you. Peace.
Crazy horse.
Peace.